Hello, welcome to Sideline Interference, which is the new college football show hosted by Steve Helwick, which is me. You can find me on Twitter at S_Helwick. I am a college football reporter, and today felt like Christmas. Week 0 of college football. We had 5 games involving FBS teams. 2 are still going on right now, and if you want to look at our current scoreboard, we had Nebraska, Illinois earlier this afternoon as the Illini took down the Huskers 30-22 in Champaign. Fresno State shut out UConn after UConn made its debut as an independent team. And UCLA Hawaii was kind of a blowout as the Bruins had that game over by the first quarter and won 44-10. And UTEP New Mexico State is currently going on, and the Miners are up 27-3 over the Aggies. Also, San Jose State is currently routing an FCS team in Southern Utah, and that would be the 5th game. So, I will be joined by guest Joe Broback shortly. He writes for Pro Football Network, used to write for Underdog Dynasty, and he is one of the best follows you will find with college football. So let's bring in Joe. And Joe is here. Joe Broback, a man that does need an introduction because he is one of the most underrated follows on college football Twitter, and I am amazed by all the analysis and time he puts into this sport, and he is just one of the best in the industry. So, Joe, how are you doing today? How was week 0 of college football for you so far?
Zero was good to have.
So we had a slew of games today. We started with Nebraska versus Illinois. What were your early takeaways from that game? Big Ten action to start the season. Illinois came out early 30-9, but Nebraska had a bit of a valiant comeback at the end, but just fell short.
Wasn't it?
Yes, especially on defense. I thought what Jake Hansen and Calvin Hart did, it seemed like they were dominating the line of scrimmage, and Nebraska really couldn't run on them. But Illinois' offense does need a little work. Other than that one throw to Deuce Spann, it felt like that Artur Sikowski wasn't going downfield too often, and it was just a bunch of short throws and run games there. So when you're looking at Illinois and Nebraska, do you see this being a different Illinois team than ones we've had in years past? And do you see this Nebraska team being different from ones we have in years past? Or do you see Illinois as maybe a team that might make some chaos in the Big Ten West this year?
It's tough to say. I would say Illinois or Nebraska is not the same team that we've seen the last 3. Scott Frost and Adrian Martinez obviously has not taken a step forward in his development. He had time to throw early in the game. I don't know if he just arm or what, but he didn't make any fired team. And obviously, with the transfers that they've lost, as the ball stuff, but I don't really see anything that was that different. for Nebraska. Now, Illinois, I don't obviously they beat Nebraska last year. They just look like a little bit more than we've seen in the year. And obviously, it's the first game under coach, so really that's surprising to say that way. But I don't know if they necessarily forward. There were times at the end of the game, garbage time, if you will, or time where prevent, and Nebraska moved the ball relatively. But I think that there's still things that they need to improve. The quarterback play, even when Brandon Pete he missed a couple of guys that were wide. Half time, offensive line is solid. I think they're really good. They have some players like Chase Brown. I think will be a lot better, but I just don't think is going to be there enough for them to actually cause some chaos.
Yes, I thought it was an inspiring performance by Illinois. Obviously, you want to bring in the Bielema era in a strong manner, and it was much better than their opener against Wisconsin last year, so you have to give the Illini props. Now, there was a game on around the similar time. I don't think there's too many takeaways we can get from it. Fresno State, UConn, nothing unexpected. UConn looked like a team that hadn't played in 637 days. Fresno State kind of took a little time to get the offense going, but once it did, they were scoring fast and they were scoring often. So, what were your main takeaways from that Fresno State and UConn game? And is UConn just staring down 0-12, 1-11 season after 1-11, 0-12 season now that they're independent?
Yeah, I think that. I think
Yes, and I really like the addition of Tyson Maeva, who came from Boise State on that defense. And I think we're in for a good matchup next week against Oregon. We'll get on that later when we start previewing week one. But Fresno State has Ronnie Rivers and a lot of good skill position players. So I think that the Bulldogs are going to be a dark horse team in the Mountain West. Moving on to UCLA Hawaii. This game could have been intriguing. I mean, Hawaii won a bowl game last year over Houston. But this one was over before it started. Hawaii's punter, his knee hit the ground. UCLA had great field position. And then it just seemed like pass rush after pass rush was getting to Chevon Cordero, bat downs, defensive lineman interception, and then UCLA would just run through them. Uh, did you see any issues that you thought might persist with Hawaii in this game? And on the contrary, you see UCLA. I mean, UCLA last year they went 3-4, but all four losses were within 7 points. Is this Bruins team going to break through this year?
talented. Why when you looked, I just player, especially in the trend. I just don't know if we really learned anything from Hawaii just because it was balls are getting for him killed dominant. One started they were trying to did not where he was did like go overthrow. They were able to run. People of Jack Charbonnet proves he had hundreds. Yeah, really just a UCLA is really a good or very.
Yeah, I tweeted that it reminded me of the Navy BYU game on Labor Day last year, where you just see one team out physicaling the other one, and UCLA's offensive line was going through Hawaii. Their running backs were going through Hawaii. I think we saw a lot of good play from Britton Brown also, in addition to Michigan transfer Zach Charbonnet. So there was that game, and yeah, UCLA didn't really show much in the passing department. So we'll touch upon that LSU game later. And do you have any takeaways from the games currently going on right now? If we look at the scoreboard right here, we have UTEP currently up 27-3 over New Mexico State, and San Jose State is currently routing Southern Utah of the FCS. So, what are your thoughts on the games going on at the moment?
I thought UTEP. I think the go of person going and that they were going to be good. I just didn't. In New Mexico State, not really surprised to see them even against UTEP, who's typically been, but obviously different. They have talent on both. Not really surprised to see it. I really, but it's more Southern missing and missing. You watch Marco's throwing questionable. Look at some plays that they made. It's just poor tackling. Not that they would be in because San Jose State's really just moved on. They can really do whatever. They just were able to. And I think that they definitely have to fix that. If we're not going to just be able to walk right in and make mistakes because it's just not going to work. Very talented team. They won them up. That this is good for them to play before USC. Hey, we don't have there are fixed immediately if we have.
Yes, and one of my favorite players in college football is Tyler Nevins of San Jose State. This guy, I think he's 230-pound running back, and he runs like a truck. He can take down like five defenders in a single play, and I love what Tyler Nevins brings to this offense. And San Jose State has done such a great job under Brent Brennan of getting the right skill position players for their offense. Derek Deese as a tight end, I think, is one of the best goal line threats in the Mountain West. And it's amazing how far this team has come because 3 years ago under Brennan, they were losing to an FCS team on this opening night. And now you can see one or two possessions through that they're in full control of the game. So that's one thing I really like. And moving on to next week, you talked a little about San Jose State, USC, and UCLA versus LSU. So we're going to run through a couple week 1 games on there. So out of the teams that played today, UTSA versus Illinois is next week. And that seemed like a very winnable game for the Roadrunners, who seem to be CUSA contenders this year with Sincere McCormick back at running back, second in the nation in rushing yards last year. A good safety tandem of Rashad Wisdom and Antonio Parks. Does your thoughts on UTSA versus Illinois change after watching the Illini today?
A little bit. Coming into the year, I thought UTSA was going to win the game, not easily. I think they pull off a win. Now I'm not so sure. I think Illinois' defense really showed me that they're they're here to compete and they're ready to play at a high level when they need to. You look at what they did in Nebraska, and for the record, Nebraska isn't not the worst offense you're going to see. We saw what Adrian Martinez is able to do with his legs with that 75-yard touchdown. We've seen the explosiveness, but Illinois really shut down, and UTSA is going to be coming in, and it's their first game. And like I mentioned before, first weeks for teams is always tough because you got new season jitters, you have the uncertainty with maybe you have some new players coming in and filling new positions and whatnot, so you have to get some chemistry with them. And I'm really high on UTSA, but I think that Illinois pulling off a win this week changed things a little bit. I still think that UTSA is going to be able to be with Illinois. I think they have a chance to still pull off that upset. I think it's just a little bit tougher, given what we saw from with the offense responding to adversity, going with their backup quarterback and still able to put points on the board and still thrive. I think that game is going to be much tighter than people think. But I think that Illinois is a much better team than people realize.
And how about UCLA playing LSU next week at the Rose Bowl? LSU seemed to be a team of kind of uncertainty last year, finishing at 5-5 in the pandemic season. This year they're back with Mac Johnson at quarterback and Keishon Butte, who had that 300-yard, 3-touchdown game against Ole Miss last year. So we didn't really get to see too much of UCLA's passing game this week and how that would work. But what do you think about LSU UCLA? Because this is a game that I feel differently about after today than I did before today.
Yeah, I think that I would feel much Thompson Rock. The overthrows really thought he was going to. He is able to set out much in his face. One of the best. Fortunately, just didn't look comfortable. Wasn't really sure. He wasn't sure what his arm do, and you throws and confident face chance. The one thing that you mentioned, I don't think anybody big. Miles Brennan gets hurt. Keishon Butte is best wide receiver. The tough part is Philly wants, even what they saw, they know that they can just be comfortable. JR's throwing by Ricks Jr., who's one of the players in all. I just don't know if that's the best LA to be in. If JR is able to take forward somehow between now and then, really feel comfortable with what they're able to do. I think that LA was able to, which because they're going to need to do that. There's really going to come down to can running game can't did look really good. Hey, they also flying else. So it really comes down to what DTR is able to open up field for the running game to start because he's got a ton of pass catcher if he can get them the football.
And then staying on the West Coast a little bit, Fresno State versus Oregon. Do you give the Bulldogs any chance against Kayvon Thibodeau and that Ducks defense?
I really don't. Even though Fresno State looked really good, they beat UConn. Let's not make it something bigger than it actually was. I do like Fresno State. I like Ronnie Rivers. I think Jake Haener is obviously much better. Depending on what his injury looks like, did get hurt towards the end of the game. Oregon's just on a different level, and there's just no, to me, there's no chance that Fresno State's able to win this. I hope I'm wrong because I'm 100% here for it, but Kayvon Thibodeau could be the first overall pick in next year's draft, and that's not something you just throw around lightly. That's something that you're getting a talented player. You know what he's capable of doing, and Fresno State didn't see anybody even close to that caliber this week. I don't know if they've ever seen anybody to the caliber of Kayvon Thibodeau in the past few years. So I think that's going to be tough for them. If the offense is able to be explosive, Oregon's offense hasn't been as explosive as it was under when Chip Kelly was around. So I guess that's the one thing that they would have going for them. The only thing is that Oregon's defense is just so good that I don't know if Fresno State's going to be able to move the ball. And if they're slow to get going again, I think that's going to do them right from the start.
Quick score update, UTEP just got a field goal and they now lead New Mexico State 30-3 before we get into next week's games. And week 0 will not be too long-lived as week 1 is coming just around the corner. And we have a very intriguing Thursday night with Minnesota, Ohio State, and Boise State UCF. I will be attending Boise State UCF, and I'm looking forward to my first run at the bounce house. So this is a game that I feel like has generated a lot of excitement around both fan bases for a while. You have the BCS Crashers on one end, and then on the other end, you have the team that really disrupted the college football playoff. So I think this is going to be an excellent kickoff game on Thursday at the Bounce House, and you know that place gets rocking. So what are your early thoughts on Gus Malzahn versus Andy Avalos, two new coaches taking over these programs that are perennial winners?
Brought Auburn roll out the window. Looking at the Avalos team. Experience. I think that this game it's on Thursdays into Boise State New earlier and big game. Problem is that week we're people just to look forward to. That if you
Yes, and Dylan Gabriel, who it's amazing that he has not participated in the AAC championship game yet with how good he has been. I know UCF lost a lot of running production from last year, so that's going to be a main focus for the Knights, but they have a very explosive receiving core with Jalen Robinson and a couple transfers from Tennessee and Notre Dame in that group, so I think UCF's offense is going to be spectacular this year, and I'd like to see how Boise State's defense counters. You did mention the Minnesota-Ohio State game. I know you're a Minnesota guy, and I know you have a really good grasp on this team. So last year, Mo Ibrahim had 100 yards in every game. I don't think people realized how good Ibrahim was last year. I think there were 2 games where he had 200 yards, and he was a very dominant running back. So against an Ohio State defense, which has massive turnover due to the NFL draft almost every single year, and they also are starting a new quarterback this year. Are there any chances that you could see Tanner Morgan, Ibrahim, and Minnesota provide a scare with Ohio State?
I think that they can try to scare for sure. You look at it a couple years ago, they played Ohio State tough quarters, and then obviously Ohio State just decided it was going to be Ohio State and take over. But this is a Minnesota team that I think people just assume is going to be really bad because they struggled last year. But the reason why they struggled is because they had a very young defense. They also struggled with COVID a lot, so they had a bunch of guys miss time because of COVID. And now you get two of their best linemen back. So the fact that Mo Ibrahim was able to do what he was able to do in 7 games last year, so he eclipsed 1,000 yards in just 7 games, and without 2 of his best linemen. Both of them are back to join the 5 that also returned. So that's 7 guys that are going to be able to play. You're talking about Daniel Falele, who's going to be potentially a first-round pick next year. Dude's 6'9", 375 pounds. I mean, it's tough to miss him. Him and Evan Neal are probably, I would say, 2 of the biggest linemen that are in college football right now. I don't know if there's anybody that joins them. It's just really hard to miss guys like that on the field. And it really comes down to Tanner Morgan. Is he able to be 2019 Tanner Morgan, or are we going to see 2020 Tanner Morgan? That's going to be the big difference for the offense, because Ohio State and everybody else knows that Minnesota wants to run the football. And if they're not able to throw, if Morgan's not able to contribute in a way that opens up the field for the running game to thrive a little bit more, then it doesn't really matter. And then the second one is going to be, what can an inexperienced defense last year, who kind of grew up and figured things out on the run, what are they able to do in terms of taking a step? They did bring in a couple of transfers that will be big contributors for them. I think that brings experience that they didn't have last year, but there's still a bunch of younger guys that are going to step up for them. Can they handle the spotlight of playing against an Ohio State? You mentioned CJ Stroud is going to be the new quarterback for Ohio State, and no one's immune to the first week jitters. No one's immune to playing their first game as a starter. And CJ Stroud is going to be probably just as nervous as everyone else, or around that. So I think that there's going to be times where he makes some poor throws, and it's just a matter of, can Minnesota capitalize on those mistakes and turn them either into points, or at least give the ball back to their offense to actually score.
Before we make a couple season predictions at the end of this thing, let's do a little more rapid fire through some of these week 1 games on Friday and Saturday. One of the Big Ten games is Northwestern, Michigan State. Do not expect many points in this one. Northwestern has under 40% of their production returning. They're going to start Hunter Johnson, the Clemson transfer again, who started in 2019. A lot of new guys suiting up for this Northwestern team, but Pat Fitzgerald seems to do a great job replacing talent every year. Quick thoughts, and who's going to win this Michigan State Northwestern defensive slugfest?
Oh man, so I think that you give Pat Fitzgerald his credit, because what he's able to do with Northwestern. I mean, I don't think anybody thought Northwestern was going to even contend for the Big Ten West, let alone win it. So that's something you always have to take into consideration. I just feel like this is going to be a Michigan State win, just because no one really knows anything about the Spartans in terms of what they're actually going to be. We know like some of the players that are going to be playing that'll be star contributors, or key contributors, I should say. So I have no reason really to feel good one way or another. It's really just, do I trust Pat Fitzgerald, or am I just like, I don't know anything about Michigan State to the point where it's like, I feel like that's a reason enough to pick them. It's going to be really tough to beat a Pat Fitzgerald, even with all that production gone. I just think that with the production that Michigan State has returning, even though it wasn't very good last year, I think that's going to be enough to help them.
Yes, Michigan State was one of 2 teams that beat a top 10 Northwestern team last year, shocked them on Thanksgiving weekend. And those Michigan State Northwestern games always seem to be good. I have an interesting stat about Northwestern. They actually, in college football playoff era, they have a 500 or better record against every Big Ten West team. So Northwestern has held down the fort in the Pat Fitzgerald era, and Staying in the Big Ten West, we have Wisconsin and Penn State, which is an interesting ranked matchup to kick off week 1 at 11 a.m. I think these were two of the most disappointing teams last year. Wisconsin really came out of the gate, crushed Illinois and Michigan. It looked like Graham Mertz was the first Wisconsin pass first quarterback they were going to have after that Illinois game, after that 20 of 21 performance with 5 touchdowns. And then Wisconsin had 3 losses where they scored 7, 7, and 6 points and finished 4-3. And if it weren't for their defense intercepting everything in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, they probably would have lost a wake. And then on the other hand, you have a Penn State team started 0-5 for the season, won their last 4, and their offense got better each week. They switched offensive coordinators this year and they got rid of Kirk Sriracha and hired Mike Yurcich from Texas. So, what are your early impressions of this game in Madison? And this seems like it could go either way with the uncertainty among these teams.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a battle for sure. Is just for everybody and it included. The loss to Indiana was just hard. It was for the most part, and he found a way to win. So I think that they'll bounce. Wisconsin's really good. They're favored to win the Big Ten. It's be a contender in the Big Ten East, but it really just comes down. James Franklin has recruited at a high level, not in the talent, both sides of be able to compete with the Ohio State. It just comes down to their quarterback. John Clifford, to me, hasn't really shown anything where it tells me that championship, but maybe Yurcich is the answer. It's the answer for what Sean Clifford needs as quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be one of the best quarterbacks. All is definitely not. But can he be good enough? This team, this is like I said, this is a super talented team. I think they do take a forward. Last year they bounced. Beating Wisconsin on the road is not. I think we're looking at a very close game, 3 points maybe at the max. Really, yeah, like I said, it comes down to Clifford's his ability to be able to elevate that. If he's able to do that, I think he wins. If he's the Sean Clifford that we've seen the last couple of years, then I don't really see how it goes so bad that it was out, but weird things happen in Madison. So I don't know. And Wisconsin just feels like a team that's ready to finally take a step forward. And you mentioned he's able to be kind of what Russell Wilson was. Then this is a team that's very scary. All of college. Again, all roads really lead through Ohio State, so are really good. They still have. I don't really see them very much, but I think that if Mertz is step forward and show that he can be more consistent passer, Wisconsin's going to be a very good team, maybe even a play.
We have about 3, 4 more games I want to go through on week 1, and one of them is a Big Ten matchup of ranked teams. And I want to remove some of my, I don't know, I just feel like I have a bias against Indiana right now because I feel like everyone thinks that they're so great. And they finished last year number 12th, and I didn't see it. I expected that Ole Miss team to beat them in the Outback Bowl. The only team they beat with a winning record was a 4-3 Wisconsin in that 14-6 defensive slugfest. I understand they didn't have Michael Penix for a lot of those games, but I just don't see Indiana as a Big Ten contender this year, and they start ranked 17 against Iowa. Do you kind of agree with some of the things I'm saying about Indiana, or do you see this as a team that's going to contend in the Big Ten East? And how do you compare them to an Iowa team that started 0-2 last year and just blew everyone else out of the water pretty much to end the year?
So I'll admit that before I even broke down Indiana, what they did last year, I was one of those people that thought they would things that Michael something you just is play against. That's just hey, we're gonna line up and you go make the stuff you But when I looked more into it, they were so lucky. A bunch of those teams. You look at State and Wisconsin, lucky to win those games. If you look at their winning for a bunch of those games, they weren't very good. They just did. They also benefited from my experience looking at the data. They're really good with turnovers. One year, not be it here. That they return a ton of talent in college football. Micah McFadden, linebackers. I don't know if they're going to be able to replicate that success. If they're not able to, can the offense use enough where they're able to take more in a consistent? Because when turnovers happen, you get better field position. Not getting turnovers, that means you're starting far. I don't know if Indiana is going to be able to do that again. Not sneaking up on anything, but he's taking them seriously. So it's going to be tough for them to beat what they did last year. So I agree with you. I don't see it, but I've done a deep dive into do. I still think this is a very talented team. It's going to be tough to beat. I just don't know if it's going to be top 15.
Yes, we have 3 more games that I want to go through because this week 1 schedule is absolutely stacked, I feel like. And one of those involves my alma mater, the Texas Longhorns, playing against the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. Now, Texas named a starting quarterback today, and it was very surprising for a lot of people. They named Hudson Card the starter over Casey Thompson. Thompson last year had a spectacular Alamo Bowl where he was completing difficult downfield passes, had 4 touchdown passes, and he honestly looked to be an upgrade over Sam Ehlinger in that game alone. We'd like to see more sample size from Casey Thompson. But Hudson Card was named the starter today, and it feels like a lot when Texas went with Sam Ehlinger over Shane Buechele in that 2017 season, where it wasn't about maybe who the better guy was at the time. It seemed to be getting the young guy who's going to have future reps on campus. So that's the Texas-Louisiana game, and Louisiana's also ranked. Billy Napier's team has been pretty consistently good for a few years now. They lost Elijah Mitchell and Trey Regis at the running back position, so they need to reload there. And Texas, they've had some questionable openers in recent years against Maryland and against Maryland again. And DKR, can Louisiana sneak up on this Texas team on Saturday night? I think it's only an 8-point spread, as the Cajuns are getting a lot more respect than they had a year ago against Iowa State.
Yeah, because this is a year that is guys were given an extra year of eligibility, which means experience returning. But I don't really know what most of the time of good amount, say good amount, if you're in like the 17 starters, and usually you have other teams and you're not sure. This year for most guys that we see 1, 2, or 3 guys stepping. Louisiana has like they're not going to sneak. The one thing that last year I don't think anybody picked it. They even believe that. When you go back, you play Louisiana. But I don't try to look too much like supposed to turn to drive on stuff. Texas is going to know that Louisiana is good, knows that Louisiana beat State, and they know helps that Louisiana is. If they win this game, I feel like maybe it'll go to Nebraska. So I think that's going to be a monument. Last year was like, well, maybe they got lucky. Be prepared for that. Everybody knows that Mark is going to
if you're able to go into Austin and come in, then props to them because it's really tough to very different challenges. Even though the Cyclones for this year, it's very different atmosphere, very different stuff. I am Louisiana this year. I just be able to for it if it happens. But
And we'd be remiss not to mention Bijan Robinson, who I know you broke down film on him recently, and it's hard not to be excited about him because in the Tom Herman era, Texas never really had a dominant running back, it felt like. It was more running back by committee, and that wasn't really their strength. Now they have a guy that averaged over 8 yards a carry last year, rushed for over 700 yards, and also operated as in the receiving game. So I think Bijan Robinson's going to be an impressive talent there this year. Staying in the state of Texas, you have done extensive coverage, especially when you were with Underdog Dynasty for the Houston Cougars. And I'm a Houston native, so I've been to a lot of their games in the past couple years. They have an interesting opener at NRG Stadium against Texas Tech. Texas Tech beat them in 2018 and 2019 in the mini two-game series. But they return here. Houston hasn't had a winning season in the Dana Holgorsen era. Year 3 is approaching, but last year was kind of a weird year for the Cougars. Now with Clayton Tune as an established starting quarterback, they got some Malbakar, who's on his 6th season on campus. Is this Houston team going to fit the mold of dark horse AAC contenders, and could they beat Texas Tech and Tyler Shuck on week 1?
I think it depends on who you ask. Me, the offense. Obviously, he's the starter. There's no doubt. Take a step forward is the big. Dana was brought in because I don't know if we see that. I don't. They have nothing that really jumps. That would be a surprise. I think their defense, especially early, line is loaded. There is. I think that the defense would be weird for you. Dana Holgorsen drive defensively, and then we have the run. Weird because I'm not super high on to be. He was going to be super good for Oregon when he was there. Brown was the best. Here, Brown ended up being the guy. He was named the for the Ducks this year. Chuck maybe just read the ball and their option, and obviously we're for him because he's harder, but I don't know. The only problem is that sure what we're going to get from Houston's offense. There's a lot of questions on both sides of the ball, and a bunch of answers to this game. For me, like I was saying earlier, Houston is a dark. Fortunately, I've just seen be like the third best team or in 9 games. That optimism. Normally, I've done that. This year, I'm just gosh. Either dark.
I feel like you're kind of calling me out there. I think I tweeted recently that they could win 9 to 10 games with that schedule. I really like how the Texas Tech, UConn, and FCS team and Rice non-conference schedule shapes up for them, and they don't have to play UCF or Cincinnati. So I'm one of those people that's high on Houston this year. I think Holgorsen can.
And that's fine. I'm on here for it. I'm just like I said, I'm optimistic and kind of concerned by that. So this year, no approach, cautious. My expectations. Everybody wins.
And then College Game Day, they usually bring the best game for last, and we're going to save that for last. So we have Clemson versus Georgia, a seeming potential playoff matchup on week 1. Clemson has DJ Uiagalelei, who last year was spectacular, but I don't think people realized how spectacular he was. I felt like he got too much of the blame of that Notre Dame loss because people would say, "Oh, Trevor Lawrence didn't start." That wasn't Trevor Lawrence. That was four missing starters on defense due to COVID. Because Uiagalelei threw for almost 800 yards without an interception in those Boston College and Notre Dame games combined. And Clemson returns its 8 leading tacklers, which is so rare for a program that produces that much NFL talent. You have James Skalski leading the unit and a couple other guys there that can make impacts for Clemson. Georgia, they had a lot of guys drafted this year. Guys like Monty Rice, Eric Stokes, and Aziz Ojulari, who was dominant in the Peach Bowl against Cincinnati. So in this game, Clemson, I think, has a 3-point favor early. I know these teams played in the mid 2010s to open the season. Is this a Clemson win, or do you think JT Daniels and Georgia can bring some heat here?
I'm picking Georgia to win.
Oh,
I think that DJ. I agree. I think DJ was unfairly got the blame placed on him unfairly. You go back and watch what he did against Notre Dame. Dude made some throws. He's gonna bring a little bit different flair to the offense, a little bit different than Trevor was leading the show. You get Justin Ross back, huge deep threat for them, and I think that there's talent everywhere on that offense. Very interesting, very exciting to watch. Only thing is that most of those guys were there, and while they did make the college football playoff, I think there were some concerns really all around. There wasn't a consistent deep threat because Ross was gone. The offensive line wasn't as good as it was at one time. Trevor obviously was good. Travis Etienne was good, but both of them are gone. There is a learning curve, I still think, with DJ. He played in 2 games. That's size for us to know how he responds to adversity. What happens when he's having a bad game? What happens when he throws a pick or two? If he's not making throws, like he's overthrowing guys or missing short, how does he respond? So I think that the offense does have some. You mentioned the defense. They return a ton of guys. Their defensive line is one of the best in college football. Brian Brissy, he was a freshman last year. I'm not convinced that he was actually a freshman. This dude is a monster. He looks bigger than guys who have been on 5 years. He just did that in his first season. He's a future star. Miles Murphy's a stud. Tyler Davis is a stud. KJ Henry's really good. There's just so many guys up front. You mentioned Skalski. Balin Spector's back. Nolan Turner at safety is back on the defense. But this is also a defense that got shredded by Ohio State. So there are some concerns on both sides of the ball. Now you flip to Georgia. They also have some concerns. Obviously, George Pickens tore his ACL, so he won't be playing, maybe not here at all. Eric Gilbert transferred there, but then now he's not with the team for personal reasons. Sounds like he might come back, but who really knows what's going on with that situation. So really, we're just back to the same offense that we had minus Pickens. JT Daniels really took that offense to a new level when he finally played. I'm not sure what took Kirby Smart so long to put him in the offense, but it doesn't matter. He's there. He takes this offense to a different level. The offensive line is solid. Their running backs are absolutely loaded. You can put any one of them in there, and they'll be just fine. And then, for me, the defense is really where they're going to stand out because you have guys who like Adam Anderson, who was in a rotation last year. He gets a chance to be a starter. Nolan Smith is another guy that'll line up on the opposite side of him. Those are 2 guys who are super explosive on the edge. They're very powerful, and they're able to make some really incredible plays. You mentioned some of the linebackers that they lose. They do get Nakobe Dean back, who led the team in tackles last year. I think he's going to be really good. He's one of the best linebackers in the country. They also get Clemson transfer Darian Kendrick at cornerback, so that's another guy that you'll have to watch. And then they also get an All-American in West Virginia transfer, Tyke Smith. So I think that, to me, Georgia is the better team. I have less concerns on overall for both sides of the ball than I do with Clemson. I think that this is a very tightly contested game. I'm really sad that we haven't had this on our week 1 slate for a while. Because when Todd Gurley and Taj Boyd were going at it, those were some of the more exciting games that we watched to begin the year. And I'm just glad that this series hopefully is back. If it's not going to be back for a while, I hope that they consider putting it back on because these two teams are usually two of the best in college football, and I would love to see them play early on because now we know even if one of those teams loses, they still have a chance to make the college football playoff because a loss to a good team really strengthens the resume because, well, we were close with Clemson. Now we won the rest of our games. So I really just hope that this is something that we see more often and more frequently, not just even with Clemson and Georgia, but other teams.
Ohio State and Oregon is another one of those games that just feels like it could be a playoff matchup. I mean, it was in 2014. It was actually our last national championship that did not have Alabama or Clemson in it in year one of the playoffs. So to wrap this up, we're going to talk about the playoff and other New Year's Six bowls. So on the screen right here, I have my own New Year's Six predictions. For the Orange Bowl, I have Oklahoma, Ohio State, and for the Cotton, I have Alabama, Clemson. Big shocker. It's surprising that those four teams have never made the playoff together, but three have made it every single year, at least since 2015. To round out my New Year's Six, I have Georgia and Iowa State in the Sugar Bowl, two teams that won New Year's Six Bowls last year. I have Cincinnati and Oregon in my Fiesta Bowl, two teams that lost New Year's Six Bowls last year. I have a repeat of the 2019 Holiday Bowl as my Rose Bowl in Iowa and USC. And to round out the New Year's Six Bowls, I have Texas A&M, the Fighting Aggies against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So, Joe, what do you agree with and what do you not agree with in my New Year's Six? What are some other teams that you think might contend for that?
Three of them are going to, and then whoever the fourth team. I think it's going to be for now. Very appropriate for me. It's tough to pick them. They're like, or go Texas. But I say I'm North Carolina. Big reason to make the sequel. You're going to or earlier with the well, it gets kind of old and you're like, it gets kind of that regular season. Sounds like we were doing that, but really I just want 14 rather watch or we'll still watch. Hey, we're gonna get I am not good at projecting bowl games. Yeah, as if I really high on it, but other than third play, but that's because no real complaint.
Yeah, I felt like Iowa was kind of my bold pick to be the second best Big Ten team. Wisconsin, Penn State are some of the other contenders in there, Northwestern. And you did mention North Carolina. My concern about North Carolina, I have them second in the ACC, but Javonte Williams and Michael Carter were so much of their production last year, and they're both in the NFL now. I know they still have Sam Howell, and having a returning quarterback of that magnitude will always get you preseason hype, but the loss of the running backs is a little concerning to me. Last thing before you go, rapid fire of conference champions predictions. AAC, I like Cincinnati over UCF. You like?
I will pick the over S.
Over SMU, Tanner Mordecai and leading the Mustangs now. I know, and Reggie Robertson's back from injury. So, and Rashee Rice, I think that SMU does have good targets. Any other reason why you want to pick the Mustangs this year?
I just think their offense comes down to defense, but they do return a ton out of the ball, and they handle the pressure of being one of the better teams in the AC. So we haven't done during this year. It's just hard for me to pick them. UCF is the trendy pick now because the Gus Malzahn nights that they're good. I think, but I think that when you look at where their schedule is, returning, I think
ACC, I'm going to pick Clemson to win the ACC every single year until they prove me otherwise. They've won it every year since 2015. And speaking of 2015, I am picking their opponent to be a rematch of that year. North Carolina back in winning the Coastal this year. You have any disagreements there?
the only disagreement, but until after, if Miami is they're able to beat, probably put above North Carolina, but right now
That was one game that we didn't discuss, but yeah, Miami does have a lot of talent on defense, and De'Aaron King returning from that ACL injury in the Cheez-It Bowl last year, so Miami is definitely a team to watch. Big 12, I have Oklahoma. I'm going to say over Iowa State. I wanted to say over Texas because Texas loses a lot of close games. Texas really never gets blown out. They're in every single game, but the Longhorns do have a few hiccups every year. Do you like Oklahoma, Iowa State for Big 12?
feel like I because I always want to say Oklahoma or TCU just because maybe the surprise team of the Big 12.
Yeah, Gary Patterson strikes a lot when you least expect it, especially that 2014 season when he followed a losing record. So TCU's a nice pick this year, and Oklahoma, they've won the Big 12 title every year, never faced the same team twice. So TCU, Texas, Baylor, and Iowa State have been their victims. Big Ten, I kind of hinted at this earlier. Ohio State over Iowa. We've never had that matchup before. Iowa was in it against Michigan State in 2015. So I'm guessing you have Ohio State in the Big Ten East. Who do you have in the Big Ten West?
Yeah, Ohio State in the Big Ten. It's like the same thing with Alabama. Pick them until you see others. But I'm going to go with Wisconsin. Like I mentioned earlier, that against Penn State is huge. How beat them, maybe Minnesota.
Okay, I'm going to get bold with this conference. CUSA, I like the UTSA Roadrunners. There's so much I like about this team with Sincere McCormick returning, Rashad Wisdom at safety, as I mentioned earlier. So many talent returning. They were able to play close games against BYU and Louisiana, two ranked teams to finish last year. So I really like what the Roadrunners have coming back on campus. I'm going to pick them over FAU. I think with Nkosi Perry, I think that Willie Taggart has more talent on his offense this year. So what's your CUSA pick? This one feels like it has a more variability to it.
I actually have the same pick. I think that everybody was picking UAB and Marshall, which is why I kind of went different. So I'm kind of glad that you did as well. Also high in UTSA. I think that surprised people. I think that winning the conference is
Maction time. I'm picking two birds that had a long standing tradition of losing but have recently risen to the top. Dustin Crum is one of my favorite players in college football to watch. A true dual threat quarterback, not just somebody who can run and then might not be able to pass. He can do both. One of the most accurate passers in the nation. Great zone read guy, too. I have Kent State, led by Dustin Crum, over Ball State for that MAC championship game. Cardinals, who won it last year. What's your pick as far as Maction goes?
oh man. So I think if Lance low, I think that I agree. Which is crazy to think under Sean Lewis because but I'm picking them. This was really tough. Full competitive. Ball State obviously last year. I really like Central. Just to be different, I'm gonna tips to
And then for the Mountain West. For this one, I'm going to go. I am a huge Carson Strong fan. Had a lot of touchdowns and very little interceptions last year. Just a passing machine. I love Romeo Dubs, Cole Turner, some of his targets that he has there. So I'm going to pick Nevada over Boise State for the Mountain West. No San Jose State this year from me. You agree with my Mountain West pick, or you have any dissenting voice in here?
I was hoping that you weren't going to pick Nevada and Boise State because that's Boise State. Just to me, I just don't see anybody even close with them. They're just so much better than everybody. I don't see anyone up on them. Nevada obviously has it much tougher when you have Diego State and Jose State. Maybe a UNLV team pulls off a couple. That to me is talented team in the Mountain West, and for that reason, I think because they also have a chip on their shoulder from not for a conference that pushes.
I'll be honest, I was not expecting UNLV to come up in a conference champions discussion with Tate Martell. Let's see what the Rebels can do this year. And for the Pac-12, I hinted at this with my Rose Bowl prediction and my New Year Six prediction. I think it's the same matchup this year, except the result gets flipped. USC reloaded their receiving core with Jake Smith and Taj Washington from the transfer portal. I think USC is loaded on skill position guys this year, and I think that they are able to take the Ducks in the Pac-12. Where is your mind going with this one?
I'm going Oregon and Arizona State. I think as long as Arizona State, this is obviously a huge asterisk. If the off-field stuff is not effective, which is again that's a huge if. I think that USC is just I don't really know. I don't get a good vibe from that program. They should be really good, but they're just not where they should be. They made it to the conference championship. They didn't belong. Oregon took it to them. The fact that Oregon returns so much talent, they didn't even win their division. They still won the conference last year. So I'm picking Oregon over Arizona State. I hope I'm wrong about USC, but
Yes, one of the more laughable things of 2020 was Washington finished first in the Pac-12 North. Oregon actually didn't even finish second. They finished third because Stanford had a game that counted in the standings the week after, and they went 4-2 in conference. So the third place Pac-12 North team won last year. Two more conferences to go. SEC, Alabama over Georgia. That's that's the chalk pick every year. Anything different?
don't know anything different. The weird one finds a way. Florida finds a way to the SEC. I'm not holding back.
Yeah, I think Florida is replacing too much talent this year. A&M starting Haynes King, a freshman, and 4 of their 5 guys from the Maroon Goons offensive line are now in the NFL. So Texas A&M did lose a lot on the offensive line, and I think that's a key thing to watch there. Although Isaiah Spiller, DeMarvin Leal, they have so much talent on this roster. Last conference, Sun Belt. I'm going to take the matchup that we all wish we saw last year in the Sun Belt Championship game. We did see it on a Wednesday night, I think. It was Louisiana versus Coastal. This time, I think Louisiana is going to beat Coastal in this one. Any crashers here? Any App States, Georgia States crash this, or are we going to get the matchup between the 2 preseason ranked Sun Belt teams?
No, I think that's the most likely option, likely outcome. I think that App State fans aren't going to like to hear that. Soon they're going to be in the Sun Belt just because they've dominated for so long. But yeah, I think we get the matchup everybody wanted to see. And
Joe, thank you so much for appearing on this debut show, which we're going to hope to make a regular stream. I'd love to have you back anytime on the season. I don't know as many people that I could find that could just break down so many teams, so many conferences, as well as you just did here. So Joe's Twitter handle is on the screen right now, at Joe Broback. Joe, I know you just got a new writing gig at PFN, which is excellent. You did so much great content for Underdog Dynasty over the years. Anything else you want to plug? I know your CFB Breakdown YouTube channel is going pretty well. If you haven't watched Joe's YouTube channel, I highly recommend to watch it. He had a great about 40-minute preview of all this week's games in depth. So, Joe, floor is yours if you want to plug anything.
oh man, thanks for happy that college football is back. Being able to every kind of excitement outside. Yeah, I mean, be back with college football and just.
Yeah, so much better to talk about actual games and hypotheticals. While Joe and I probably could talk about college football all day, I think it's time to have this stream come to a wrap. So thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you probably Friday night, getting back from a flight there after the UCF Boise game, then Northwestern Michigan State's that night. Hopefully I'll be able to recap some of those. So that's next time I expect. Thanks for